On Saturday, as Emily and I were dancing the night away at our wedding, we were blissfully unaware that the world lost a true American hero. So this week's political figure episode isn't going to be for a president or a senator or a governor or a congressman. Today it's going to be remembering Kris Kristofferson. Kris was 88 years old when he passed away on Saturday, and it's sad to say that that is still gone too soon. And before I go any further, if you don't know who Kris Kristofferson is, first off, shame on you, and I need you to stick around. And if you do know who Kris Kristofferson is, you may be wondering why I'm doing a political figure video on the guy who trained Blade to kill vampires, led a convoy of disgruntled truckers across the United States, and sang some of the saddest songs your heart's ever known. Well, that's because Kris Kristofferson is arguably the foundation of outlaw country. He's the reason that the highwaymen started doing outlaw shit, and outlaw shit is progressive as fuck. He is the shining example of how a person with a platform should perform. Now, Kris was a walking contradiction, a man who shattered stereotypes, the definition of dichotomy. Kris grew up as an army brat, moving around a lot, and he was no stranger to hard work, taking a job with a dredging contractor at the age of 17. But he was also a poet, having 2 short stories published in The Atlantic by the age of 18. One of these 2 short stories was addressing racial issues, and the year was 1954. So for a white military brat in the 1950s getting published for talking about racial issues, that's pretty impressive right off the bat. He then went to Pomona College, where he was a star athlete in literally everything. And when I say star athletes, he literally got published in Sports Illustrated for his achievements in rugby and football and track and field. So by 1958, he was a nationally recognized athlete, so a jock, but also a published writer and also an army brat. Definitely all traits we all assume one person would have concurrently. And to top it all off, the motherfucker looked like this. So yeah, he definitely won some lottery. But if that's not enough, the bastard had to go and graduate summa cum laude, and then got a Rhodes Scholarship to go to Oxford. So on top of all the other shit, he's a certifiable fucking genius as well. And then just to rub it in a little bit more about how he's apparently a fucking demigod, he went and got awarded a blue in boxing at Oxford, which is apparently like the highest award you can get for punching other people in the face. So incredibly smart, tough, artistic, world-class athlete. Yeah, just all of the things you think get mixed together in one person. It just almost makes you fucking angry that one person got all of that. Like, couldn't we have spread this around a little bit? If you think the badassery ends there, buckle up, Buttercup, because Kristofferson makes Hemingway look like a little bitch. Because after leaving Oxford, he joins the fucking army and becomes a goddamn helicopter pilot. Oh, and also becomes a fucking ranger. No big deal. So he deploys to Germany. He starts a band while he's in the army, and then eventually the army's like, hey, will you teach English at West Point? And he's like, nah, I want to go do country music shit. And he leaves the army. So he moves to Nashville, and then right away he gets a job at Columbia Records, sweeping floors. Yeah, the music thing didn't start off so great, which is probably good. The man clearly needed some humbling experiences, because even Hercules had a harder time becoming a hero than Kris. But at least working at Columbia, he was Johnny Cash adjacent, although it didn't seem to do him much good, because Johnny Cash seemed it was more appropriate to throw Kristofferson's demo tapes into the lake behind his house rather than listen to them. So he was down on his luck and running out of money, because apparently janitor isn't that lucrative of a career. So he started moonlighting as a helicopter pilot, flying for an oil company to their rigs out in the Gulf. Can you just take a moment to let that sink in? He was a janitor moonlighting as a helicopter pilot for an oil company. Did I say dichotomy? He also hit a new all-time low and rejoined the military, this time with the National Guard, which was something he really did not want to do. But hey, it seems like when people are at their worst is when their art is at its best. And some of the best songs ever written came out of those bad times. And the only reason we know about them is because Kris now had access to an army helicopter, which while on a training mission one day, he took a detour with and landed on Johnny Cash's lawn to deliver his goddamn demo tapes. Like, that is genuinely the most outlaw shit an outlaw has ever outlawed in the history of country music. Who does that? Who steals a goddamn army helicopter to get Johnny Cash's attention to launch your music career? Kris Kristofferson, that's fucking who. Now, Kris is an incredibly humble man, and the way he tells the story and the way Cash tells the story are dramatically different. Cash recalls Kris stumbling out of the helicopter with a beer in his hand and handing him the demo tape directly. However, even Kris Kristofferson probably still needs both hands to fly a helicopter, so I'd take Cash's story with a grain of salt. But it's fun imagery. But whatever the reality of that story may be, on that Huey delivered demo tape, there was a song about Sunday morning coming down. Definitely one of the greatest songs ever written, and the song that would launch Kris Kristofferson's music career. Later that year, Janis Joplin would go on to record one of Kris Kristofferson's songs about a guy named Bobby McGee. And it's usually here where you'd say that the rest is history, but It's Kristofferson. So now not only was he writing some of the most iconic and genre-spanning songs in history and singing in sold-out shows both as a solo act and as a member of the iconic outlaw supergroup The Highwaymen, he was like, you know what, maybe I'm gonna go be a Hollywood actor as well. And then he went and did that. A year after landing on Johnny Cash's lawn, he starred in a movie, and then a lot more movies. Like, he was still doing movies back like 4 or 5 years ago. And he was a good actor too. Like, how does one man get so much talent? But the man never let the success go to his head, and he never stopped standing up for those less fortunate, even at his own expense. Some of it was just in his music, writing songs about touchy issues, like protest songs about the war, about substance abuse and addiction, about homelessness and sex. He was labeled by Time magazine as the most controversial country singer-songwriter of the era. And that commitment to writing about what's right and representing the unrepresented, damn the consequences, spurred a whole new genre of music, inspiring artists for years to come, like Steve Earle, who said that he wanted to be like Kris Kristofferson when he grew up, a hyper-literate hillbilly, which is a moniker I could not love more. But it wasn't just what he wrote in his music. He stood up for other people who were being put down for standing up themselves. When Muhammad Ali was ostracized for criticizing the Vietnam War, Kristofferson was like, fuck those guys, and became his best bud. When Sinead O'Connor was booed off stage for singing a song protesting the Catholic Church, he publicly consoled her, saying, don't let those bastards get you down. Kristofferson was shit-talking Ronald Reagan on television before it was cool. On a talk show in 1991, he said the Reagan administration was responsible for the one-party system and being the lapdog of the media, cranking out propaganda that would make the Nazis blush. He was a strong labor supporter and union supporter and played a bunch of benefits for the United Farm Workers. He was playing benefit concerts for Palestinian children decades before all of these performative activists popped up out of the woodwork. And he kept doing it despite the fact that a bunch of venues canceled him as a result, and it made it really hard for him to find work. And he said if that's the way it has to be, then that's the way it has to be, because if you're going to support human rights, you've got to support them everywhere. And he did all this with humility, never ever claiming a moral superiority or high ground. In fact, the opposite. He made no effort to hide that he was a flawed man, openly admitting and writing songs about his struggles with alcohol and drug addiction, about his failed marriages, about all of his general struggles as a human being. And that is part of what made Kristofferson's messages so powerful. No stones were ever thrown in his glass house, and if you ever got hit by a rock he pitched, you damn well deserved it. His mouth never wrote a check his actions couldn't cash, or not cash in the sense of losing work for doing what was right. And the man was a shining example of what it looks like to put the human in humanity, and showed us that if we have the courage to do it, there's no one who can define what we are except for us. You can be a white guy from Texas who's a champion of civil rights. You can be the veteran who stands against blind patriotism. You can be a boxer and a scholar, a pilot and a janitor. You can steal an army helicopter and force your way into the spotlight as a representative of the unseen. Although don't do that. Don't steal an army helicopter. They got like GPS and shit now. You can spend your whole life trying to force the world to pay attention to you, and when they finally do, you can accept that attention with humility. The world is a far better place because Kris Kristofferson was a part of it, and it's a sadder place because he's gone. But the legacy he left behind is a gift to humanity, and we can always look back at that when we're suffering through our hard times and be reminded that our mistakes don't define us, and being human means being imperfect. And when we're struggling to find the clarity and courage to do what's right, he left us all a song or two to remind you that you just need to ask what Kristofferson would do. May he rest in peace.